Good evening. May I first greet the members of the Ramos family who are here tonight. I saw Freddy Halasco, Alex Sembrano, and Lloyd Martino who were here earlier. I greet the grandchildren, Sam Jones, Patrick Halasco, CJ Sembrano, and Mads Halasco. And I'd like to greet my fellow members of the Ramos cabinet who are here tonight. I was asked to give a 7-minute eulogy. I'm glad that NARS told me it was 7 minutes because I had anticipated saying a eulogy, and I was already running something like about 20 pages. And because, as Frank and Rene said, there's just so many stories to say about Eddie Ramos. He was a multifaceted fellow. So many characteristics that one could just talk about endlessly. But unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of time. So what I did was I trimmed my 20 pages to just 5 pages to keep within the 7 minutes. And so with your indulgence, I'd like to read it verbatim. I wrote this from the heart. And so before anything else, Elizabeth, my wife, and my children join me with profound sadness in extending our sincerest condolences to you on the passing of former President Fidel V. Ramos. FVR was the greatest post-war president the Philippines was lucky to have at the right time and at the right place. He was many things all at once to many of us. A patriot, a hero, a leader, a soldier-statesman, a peacemaker, a reformer, a nation builder, and in retirement, trustee of the nation. His heroism became evident early in life. In Korea, at the Battle of Erie Hill. Those interested to know about his saga in Korea can Google it. But this much I can say. The Koreans are so grateful to the Philippine government and to President Ramos's involvement during the Korean War that in Seoul's War Museum, there's a section dedicated to the Philippines and a special corner for FVR. He was Special Forces bred at Fort Bragg. He was the first company commander of the Philippine Army's fledgling Special Forces, which is now a regiment. Later, as Philippine Constabulary Chief and AFP Vice Chief of Staff, he founded the PC Special Action Force, now known as the PNP SAF, together with General Renato de Villa. He epitomized the Special Forces ethos in all that he was and in all that he did, serving with distinction whenever and wherever his country sent him or needed him. He lived up to his motto of de oppresso liber, translation, to free the oppressed. Fast forward to 1986. The dictatorship had succeeded in corrupting institutions, oppressed the people, fueled the insurgency, rewarded cronies, and crashed the economy. And consequently, the country became Asia's sick man. But because he believed that a free society was vital for the country's long-term growth and development, he broke away from the dictatorship. He took hold of a military revolt that quickly morphed into people power, resulting in regime change. But more importantly, it opened a window for national renewal. In the next 3 years that followed, he defended our fragile democracy and freedom, and he helped restore from rebel forces at least 7 times. The worst ones were in 1987 and in 1989, targeting the country's centers of gravity. And we have to thank him as well as then Chief of Staff General De Villa for having quelled especially the toughest and the most hurtful to the country, which was the 1989 coup. His heroism earned him his ticket to the presidency. As the 12th President of the Republic, he dedicated himself to making things right and doing things the right way. His rolled-up sleeves signaled that he was going to run the 6-year presidential marathon all the way to the finish line. And as has been said already, and I will repeat because this will be repeated by many of us, he was decisive, tireless, steady under fire, situationally aware, in which case you could not make any boladas, because when he would ask you a question, it was not because he wanted to learn, he already knew the answer. He just wanted to know whether you knew it. And he led by example, as well as he was a man who mastered timing. He was a master of timing. And he empowered his team and managed by objectives. That's how he got things done. I've personally internalized 9 words that President Ramos came across to me as a code on how to be a better Filipino for a better Philippines. First is UST, Unity, Solidarity, and Teamwork. The second is CSD, Caring, Sharing, and Daring. But there's a third set of 3 words that's hardly spoken about, but which he touched upon in one of his books. Reform, Perform, Transform. And that to me was a code that I had internalized. And I said, had people listened to President Ramos and not considered those 9 words as a mere political slogan, we would be better off as a nation today. But on top of those 9 words, additionally, and it has been said, we learned all about completed staff work, that's CSW, and another acronym of NLT, not later than, for timely compliance. And of course, the signature thumbs up to signify, kaya natin ito. FVR proved how unity, solidarity, and teamwork could quell security threats. It was all about teamwork with the people that he had. Resolve and recover from crises, and restore trust and confidence in the country with Team Philippines. Although his presidency was bookended by the power crisis and the Asian financial crisis, the economy rose to Tiger Cub status through a strategic mix of good governance, peace initiatives across the board, from the MNLF to the CPP and PANDF to the MILF to the CPLA and of course the RAM. And of the 5 where we were involved up front and also at the back room, we were able to resolve the issues with RAM, with the MNLF, and with the CPLA actually, although there was no formal agreement because Conrado Balweg was killed before he could sign a peace agreement with the president. The thing about the MILF and the CPP, NPA, CPP, NDF, those were work in progress by the time he left the presidency. And I recall that he kept on bending backwards and walking the extra mile for a new beginning. He worked 24/7 for duty, honor, and country. But for us in the cabinet, it was 25/8. And we used to tell him, Mr. President, you're really an Ilocano. Why? Because we're overworked and underpaid. Emphasis on underpaid. That was our new normal. The longest days were field visits and cabinet meetings on location. He didn't want people coming to Malacanang. We had to go to the people. Where we would wake up at 4 a.m. and depart from Villamor Air Base at around 6 and then return by around 10 p.m. And you'd think we would go home by then? No, he'd still have a meeting to wrap up things. By then, everyone's tongues were hanging out, especially his political and media critics who he personally invited to join in such ventures, who were very unfamiliar with his work ethic and who, after going through the mill, learned very quickly the virtues of prudence and circumspection the next time they opened their mouths or wrote about him. For 22 years after his retirement, until early 2020, FVR was our elder statesman. He represented the country in various capacities. Chairman of the BOA Forum, as a special emissary to break the ice with China, and the many road shows that he held to promote a book and a documentary, which I will talk about also later. And each time that he would come back from his trips, he would submit written reports to the national leadership for reference and for posterity. He wrote weekly sermons, and this was in the Manila Bulletin, and authored many books. I stopped counting. I have a library, and I think I have several shelves there of FVR's books, and I've run out of shelf space. His advice was sought by heads of state, diplomats, businessmen, and pillars of society. And he was a media favorite. To many of us, FVR was our leader and buddy, an uncommon man with uncommon valor. He was larger than life, a living legend. But he was also down to earth and most at ease, bantering with whoever with his vintage acts of endearment. I mean, who can ever forget his tight hand grips? His push-up challenge. The last time I saw him do 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups was when he was 84, and he was at the PMA, and he called the class of cadets to come on stage and do the push-up challenge. But he started with 10 only. Then after 10, he'd go, another 10, until they reached 100. And if they thought that was the end of that, he says, okay, on your butt, and they did sit-ups, 10 only, until they did another 100. And I think he did that. Oh, by the way, after that, he would just stand up and go to the microphone and continue where he left off, without skipping a beat or, without showing any hard breathing. And I think that's what he wanted to show about how a special forces guy is, and how we should all be like the special forces. That regardless of all the pressures, regardless of the fog of battle and all that, you should still be as fit as ever and be able to think clearly. Sir, thank you for your trust. I learned much from you about managing crisis, handling the press and politicians, enforcing the law without fear or favor, persistent peacemaking, applying rules of engagement and the principle of command responsibility, combating crime, corruption, insurgency, and terrorism, and of course, advancing the national interest. You had my back through all that. And thank you, sir, for sponsoring my schooling at Harvard Kennedy that enabled me to reunite with my family, whom I had not seen for years because of our workload, and for my board seat in a multinational company after I graduated, and for your full support for the book Silver Linings and Tagaligtas documentary, which captured your decades of outstanding service and the vast influence that you had on society and the community of nations. I was privileged to work in your shadow, experiencing a kaleidoscope of indelible moments since we first met in 1986, which are too numerous to mention in an eulogy like this one. FVR died before President Corazon Aquino's death anniversary. Two presidents I had the honor and privilege of serving with in government. And that goes for most of us who are here. She endorsed his run for the presidency, and the rest is history. We lost a good son of the Republic, a peacemaker who earned his ticket home. Who he really was and what he accomplished will long be extolled by scholars in public records and honored forever at the libigan ng mga bayani. He left behind a legacy that beckons every Filipino to toil each day for a better tomorrow. Kaya ba natin ito? Sabi ni FVR, mahina, hindi niya narinig. Ulitin natin. Kaya ba natin ito? Maraming salamat po.